Okay, members, good morning and welcome to the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee. I'm going to go around because it's live streamed. I'll go around asking people to introduce themselves if I may. So I'm Leo Madden and I chair this particular committee.
Councillor John Ferret, Councillor for Portsgrove Ward.
Councillor Simon Bosher, Drayton and Farlington.
Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Michael Lloyd, Finance Manager for Technical and Financial Planning.
Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
Kelly Nash from the Strategy Unit.
David Morman from the Procurement Department.
Paul Somerset, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
Elizabeth Goodwin, Chief Internal Auditor.
David White, External Audit Manager from Ernst & Young.
Peter Welf, Deputy City Solicitor.
John Bell, Director of HR Legal and Performance.
Michael Lawther, City Solicitor and Deputy Chief Executive.
Joanne Miles-Smith, Democratic Services.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I just do some housekeeping, which is if the continuous fire alarm sounds, evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lift. And please assemble at Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. And can I draw your attention, as we're already done, that we've been live stream, whatever it is, live web streaming today. Okay? I have apologies from Councillor Neil Young. I already had them from Simon Bosher, but I've spoken to him and he's turned up.
Chairman, I also have apologies from Councillor Ian Lyon.
Oh, okay. All right, so did you get that? Councillor Ian Lyon as well won't be here today. Oh, we'll see how it goes. You've got a copy of one of the reports in front of you. I presume it's just because this is coloured. Yeah, okay. So you've got a coloured copy of the. I can't remember the number of it. Okay, thank you. Could I, in case I forget at the end of the meeting, thank Michael Lowther, whose last meeting he hopes. This is of Governance Audit and Standards. He's been around for some time now, Michael. Always been involved in this committee. Always given you good advice. The number of times we've changed standing orders or need to change standing orders. Not so much the Constitution, I have to say, because things happen, and Michael's been there and made sure it happened, Michael. So I wish you well in your retirement. I'm sure the committee does, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and of course we have Peter Balfe here, who will be replacing Michael on this committee. So welcome, Peter. It's easier than licensing. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, members? Anybody? None? None? Okay, thank you. Can we do the minutes of the meeting of the 1st of February? And we go through them for accuracy and matters arising. We'll go through for accuracy and matters arising, that's okay. I'll do them page by page. And I'll do the big numbers. So page 7. Oh, sorry, at the bottom of the page. Instead of 1. Have you got?
We've got a separate.
Oh, have you? You've all got. I think I had as well. Okay. Let's start again. Page 1. Page 2. I think all those bullet points have been answered in relation to that, haven't they?
Yes.
Okay. Page 3. Again, I think it's 76 where Greg Povey was happy to meet with one of the councillors. That would have been arranged between them.
Yeah, those arrangements have been made.
Page 4. Page 5. Just a bit down, the very last sentence on page 5. Has anything happened on that? One member commented that the figure seemed high and asked whether it could be revisited.
Sorry, I don't have the answer on that, but I'll get it provided to members.
Okay, thank you. Page 6. Page 7. page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11. Items 12 and 13, as members will recall, were agreed by Council at the last Council meeting, so they are now being incorporated in the Constitution. Okay, thank you. Page 12, then. Page 13. Are those minutes agreed? Those who are here?
Agreed.
Thank you. We have a deputation there from Jerry Brown on a couple of items. Jerry, would you like to come forward, please? He's doing both together.
Good morning. Thanks for listening to me again. It's like waiting for Godot some days, isn't it? I think I said that last time, didn't I? Anyway, I'm going to talk about two items on the agenda, items 5 and 9. And I will tell you which one I'm talking about as I go through, because I'm going to sort of jump between the two of them, but it won't take very long. So, as you will recall, in previous meetings of this committee, it's been proposed and accepted that a record of all the future actions would be kept and reported at future meetings. I can't find that record anywhere in the reports pack, and whilst I know that strolling through the minutes is a useful way of looking at what was done at the last meeting, it doesn't actually reflect what was done at the meeting before that, because those actions are not carried forward. So I'd request, please, for all council meetings where actions are placed upon officers or members, that those actions are recorded and that is reported as part of the reports pack. And if it's not already being done, but just not reported, but if it's not already being done, then that is already a failing, in my view.
Can I say on that, I agree with you. I'm sorry about that, and I think we do it quite liberally here, but I think it's right, it should be recorded. For instance, we've cleared some this morning and we recorded that action's been taken. Thank you.
That's very true, thank you, Leo, but we don't have a record of the things that happened in the meeting before last that weren't done. That's my point.
Okay, well, I'll look at that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is agenda item 9. So following the discussion of the red, green and amber ratings, it was stated that it was agreed at the next meeting, as well as the usual report, a sample or template of the proposed new report format would also be provided. That action was placed on John Bell. It's in the minutes on page 15, but I couldn't find it in the reports pack.
It's going to happen. Once we've done that, once we've done that item 9, then we're going to have a look at a template.
Thank you. You've already covered my next point, which was the schedule of claims. No, you didn't actually. A member commented that he said he hadn't seen the schedule of claims settled being brought forward to this committee, and the city solicitor said he'd be happy to provide that. I can't see where it's been provided or noted in the minutes that it has been provided.
Chairman, if I can just assist with that, an email was sent to all members on the committee setting out the complaints which had actually been settled. I'm quite happy to provide that to Mr. Bryan. I don't think it provides a tremendous amount of information because it has been anonymised, but it just gives the parameters and an indication of the number of complaints and the range.
Sorry to interrupt your deputation, Jerry. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I do seem to recollect that at a previous governance and audit meeting, we have had discussions around actions and follow-ups, and I do remember having made previous comments that although it's well and good to follow up with emails to members on omissions and follow-ups and the such like, the public realm does not have a record of that. We just had an instance slightly earlier on where Mr. Lawler had forgotten something and he's going to provide it to members, but it's part of the agenda. So surely if we're going to provide information or follow-ups, it's great to provide it to the members of the committee, but it should go on the website as part of the minutes of a meeting, should it not, that information was provided? We've had this conversation at least a couple of times in my lifetime.
Yes, Simon, that's a fair point, and I think we need to look to do that. We'll look into that, yeah, Michael, but we'll make sure it happens. Okay. Jerry, you're going to carry on uninterrupted.
I'll carry on, thank you. It's like just a minute, isn't it? Only a bit longer. Agenda item 5. There were 4 audit reports due on MMD prior to this meeting covering recruitment, procurement, payroll and gifts and hospitality, all due to report in February 2019 or before. I can't find these reports here, although I note they are mentioned on page 34 of the reports pack. I thought if they were due in February, then they would be published, but I can't find them. Moving on, agenda item 5. I note that the failure to implement a compliant gifts policy at MMD was blamed on the fact that the policy at MMD was implemented before PCC acquired MMD. Well, I thought that PCC acquired MMD in February 2008. So is it correct then to assume that the policies, procedures and protocols of a fully owned subsidiary have been non-compliant for 10 years and that no review of such has been carried out and that this is okay? I mean, frankly, in business, if this was me, if I'd acquired a business for the corporation, hadn't checked its compliance with the gift policy for 10 years, then I would expect to face some very serious questioning. And then it raises the question for me, well, if it's the case for MMD that in 10 years we haven't checked the gifts policy, where else have we not done things that perhaps we should have done? And what I'd like to see is somewhere every year a piece of paper signed by the managing director of the fully owned subsidiary companies that says that they have checked that they are compliant with the gifts policies and any other policies that they are required to comply with. And then agenda item 9. This is a repeat of the past. Please can governance audit and standards receive a regular update on the property portfolio performance? This was something that was promised when the property portfolio was established. The 20% that's supposed to be going to affordable housing and so on hasn't really been made clear where it's being spent. So there's a little on this on page 82 and 83 of the performance report, but not what has been requested in the past. So please can we see, and I'll be specific, the total amount of money borrowed to include and identify all sources, including government grants such as that for Tipner, the total amount of money invested, the amount of fees paid, the total amount of interest paid, the amount of rents received, the amount of interest received on money borrowed and not yet spent, the current occupancy percentage in terms of rental income, reporting on deviation from plan and any changes to future risk. These are things that I would expect to see as standard. None of them are specific to any particular property. They're just talking about the portfolio in general. I'd be happy to see it anonymised, but I think it's a report that we should have. This is getting on for £150 million of borrowed money that we are investing as PCC on behalf of me, the taxpayer, and everybody else who's a taxpayer. It should be reported on. We should know. And we don't want it obfuscated with, well, it's made more money because we borrowed the Tipner regeneration money to make it look like we didn't pay as much interest. But we don't know because there's no reporting. Right. And my last point again was, can we please go back to having a record of all the actions and chase them through, not just from the last meeting, but from the one before and the one before that, because they don't get carried over in the minutes. That's it. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bryant, for that. On some of them, for instance, item 9, where a meeting was to be arranged with Councillor Lyon by MMD. I don't know that happened, but we do know that it was left down between the two of them. So, but we'll seek to record that in future as a matter arising then when it happens. Okay. And the other bits we'll have a look at, Jerry. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, members, can we move on to item 4, please? The External Auditor's 1718 Certification Report.
Thank you, Chair. So our paper today is our certification report for 2017-18. This covers the work that we carried out on the Council's housing benefits subsidy claim for the 17-18 year. We undertake a programme of work on the subsidy claim that uses a methodology that is set out by DWP and PSAA, and which involves the use of sample sizes which are dictated by that methodology. We are then required to report the findings of our work, either to report through a qualification letter or to make agreed amendments to the final certified subsidy claim, depending on the nature and extent of the issues identified. Pages 25 to 27, as per the page numbers in the main pack, or 5 to 7 of the EY report, set out the detailed findings of the work that we carried out for 1718. In summary, the council's subsidy claim had a total value of just over £102 million. We made agreed amendments to the claim with a total value of £43,000, and we reported extrapolated errors in the qualification letter with a total value of just under £100,000. Happy to take questions on the sort of detail of the findings, but I wasn't proposing to talk through them blow by blow at this point. I think it's probably worth noting that the overall rate of error identified through our work is similar to the prior year, and not dissimilar to other councils of a similar size. We would always expect to identify a small number of errors through this work, both through the complexity of the housing benefits system itself and through the complexity of some of the individual cases in the council's caseload. The other point that I just wanted to draw attention to is on page 29 per the main pack, or 9 per the EY page numbers, which is that we have proposed a small additional fee in relation to the work. That is because the fee which is set initially, the scale fee set by PSAA, is based on the work which was carried out 2 years prior, so for 2015-16. The overall quantum of work carried out in 17-18 was greater. And that additional fee is based on the hours taken and then hourly rates which are set by PSAA, not by EY. That's been agreed with the Director of Finance, and it remains subject to agreement with PSAA.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, John?
Yeah, that was helpful in terms of, I was going to ask a question about sort of comparative analysis with other councils and also how this compared with what happened previously. And I know what you said about that. Is there any assurance given as such on something like this, or is that not? Because obviously when audits take place, we're usually told whether there's full assurance, limited assurance, or no assurance. Is there a rating that's given for that, or is that not something that's applied in these circumstances?
Not as such. So the certification process requires that we effectively sign off the subsidy claim that is agreed at the end of the process, so by the 30th of November, as being correct, except for the items which are reported in the qualification letter. As I say, the methodology is, I suppose you would say, somewhat arbitrary in terms of the sample sizes and the amount of work that's required to be carried out, and the degree of assurance which you could take from that process. So, for instance, we are only required to test 20 cases per subsidy type from the initial caseloads. But, as I say, that process is deemed by DWP sufficient to allow us at the end of it to sign the subsidy claim as correct, except for the small number of issues which were set out in the qualification letter. So it's not an audit in the sense of, applying a sort of ISA-compliant methodology which would allow us to give you assurance directly, but you can infer some from the approach which is taken, I guess I would say.
Thank you. Any other points or questions, members? Okay, thank you. Can we note the external auditor's report? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you. If we move on to item 5, the audit performance status report to the 22nd of February 2019.
Thank you. Could I pick up on a couple of points, though, that Mr. Brown made?
Please do. Please do.
In relation to, I think, one of the first comments, which was around we had noted in the previous reports that the expected reporting period for a couple of the MMDs was February. It is the expected, which means I will only ever report to you when we've concluded everything. And unfortunately, audits can have small delays. So I've noted in this particular one, so they're not included because they haven't concluded. And they will be reported at the next reporting cycle. There's a very small turnaround between the last reporting cycle and this reporting cycle. So that's the response in relation to that. So as and when they are finalised, they will come through. That is expected, but that might move, that time frame.
Could I just say on that, well, there's a lesson to be learned, isn't it? We shouldn't be giving definitive dates then. We could say buy if available or whatever, yeah? I think that's the sort of thing that Mr. Brown was getting to. And then we'd understand that it's not... The hope is it'll be here by February 19, but it may not happen for some reason.
That's why I've said expected. But I can widen. In relation to the MMD policy, I may check with Mr. Brown at a later stage, but our report was saying it was last reviewed in 2018, not that it was only drafted in 2018. But I will clarify just to make certain that I've understood it correctly. Coming back to the report, obviously, that we have on the table, and hopefully you will have your coloured versions. We are practically there. We have a number of audits that we will need to conclude. We have a no assurance audit that we need to raise with you, which is in relation to the community centres, which I'm happy to take any questions when we get to the end of going through the particular report. Follow-up work is obviously still progressing, and that is included within this report that details what is open, what is closed, which is following a review of agreed follow-up actions. We have no critical exceptions, but this really is to tell you that we are on track. One area is causing us concern. We have gone through this with the particular director that is responsible for this particular area, which is in relation to community centres, and we have had full cooperation and buy-in, and there is proposed actions that are in place to address the many issues that were raised, and we will carry out a follow-up review within the next 4 months of the new financial year to make certain that everything that has been agreed has been implemented. In relation to the community centres, we specifically looked at those that were staffed by PCC staff. So we will undertake an exercise for next year where we look at those associations where we're giving a grant and see what those arrangements are, but it will be a slightly different audit. So in relation to the 18-19, we are practically there. It will be sufficient to be able to give an opinion. But I've also included the 19-20 audit plan. So there is a schedule and a list of audits for you to consider. This is not quite a complete list, in that there will be a number of follow-ups that will be added to the plan, but I can't tell you as of yet which ones they are, because it will be dependent upon the results of the work that we undertake, which is currently in progress. We will follow up on any area where there is a high risk and when there is critical risks. We don't generally follow up on medium and low unless it is attached to an audit that has a high ranking exception already open. So I envisage that the plan that has been submitted will grow. The schools, there is an allocation in there that we will undertake some schools reviews, but at present we're in negotiation with which schools they will be. And obviously I have not sat down with the board of directors for MMD to determine which areas we're going to be looking at in relation to that particular scope. So I am happy to take any questions you may have in any of the areas.
Okay, the city solicitor would like to make a point.
Thank you, Chairman. For one very small point of clarification. Mr. Bryan raised a concern that he thought that perhaps we had a number of companies, businesses wholly owned by PCC, which would be trading without actually being compliant with PCC's policies. Absolutely right that any companies which we own should comply with relevant policies, and absolutely right that MMD in particular should have been complying with our gifts and hospitality policy. However, I wouldn't like the public to think that there was a large range of companies which the Council owns which are presently trading which are non-compliant. As far as I'm aware, there are only 2 companies which are presently active which PCC own, which is Vessel and MMD. The other companies are dormant, so it's quite a narrow range of companies, albeit that having been said, they still should be compliant.
Okay. Michael, thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Any questions or points from members on this particular item? John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, Lizzie anticipated one of my questions, which was about what happens to those community centres that are run by associations, and I think you said that that's going to be a focus of future audit. And I was raising that because the community centre in my own ward is one of those that has recently been taken back under council control, and I am aware of 2 reports, I think, that were undertaken into what was happening at the community centre. I don't know if Lizzie is aware of those reports.
I am, but they're not our reports. I am, but there are 2 independent reports, neither of which were performed by internal audit.
Okay.
But I'm aware of the content.
Okay. I was concerned about, I didn't really understand the status of those reports, but I think you've confirmed that it's not under audit as such, and I do know from Mr. Lawver his involvement with that, and they were undertaken by Mr. Povey, I think, in terms of looking. So, yeah, if Michael can clarify sort of what auspices those reports are undertaken.
There were 2 reports. The initial report, which was commissioned by me, which was undertaken by Mr. Povey, which was into the management and running of the centre by the Paulsgrove Community Association. The second report, which I was commissioned to undertake at the request of the leader of the council, which I did, and which was externalised to Mark Heath, who is a solicitor working in private practice, who is well known to us as former monitoring officer of Southampton, which was a report to look at the procedure which was followed in the initial report by Mr. Povey, and he concluded that the procedure was followed was not an abnormal procedure, and the report itself was signed.
Okay, notwithstanding under what auspices those reports were undertaken, I think they did highlight many of the issues that Lizzie has highlighted in this report, and I suppose it is, some very concerning things as well. So I suppose it is, I was going to say, if Lizzie hadn't said about undertaking an audit, that it should be a matter of urgency, if not priority, in undertaking an audit in those associations. I recognise they are run largely by people that are volunteers or, with the best of intentions. But I think this report has highlighted, even in those community centres which are under the control of the council, that there are still some very serious issues there, and ultimately the liability rests with the council for those community associations as such, and there's all sorts of issues around utilisation as well, that we have community centres there. I know the one in my own ward that was being utilised about 30%, and there's a huge need for community services and things for kids to do, and yet that's just not being provided. So I think we need to focus on that as well in terms of the assets that we have, how they're being utilised.
Thank you, John. Simon, sorry, I had you next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm probably being a little bit more specific about my own ward's community centre as much as anything else, and that's more to do with the legal status of it, because you've listed 18. There are 18 on the website, which says to me that you've included the Drayton Centre in it. My understanding is that the Drayton Centre doesn't fall under the auspices of PCC in any shape or form, but can you just clarify that for me, Lizzie?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I won't be able to. I'll have a look at present, but I can't remember off the top of my head which ones were included. We'll attempt to pull that information out between now and the meeting.
If you could, because I've just had a quick look at the website, and our website, and we list 18 community centres, and your report basically talks about the authority currently has overall responsibility and ownership of 18 community centres in the ward. Now, the Drayton Centre doesn't have any monies from the City Council in any shape or form. It's run by trustees, and the land and the building was gifted by the church to the community. So I'm not quite sure whether your report is actually quite accurate in its opening statement, to be quite honest.
Are you happy to leave that with us if there's other questions, as and when, because we'll look at what's sat underneath. So if you can leave it with us for hopefully the next 10 minutes, we'll have the answer.
That's fine, Lizzie. I appreciate it. I was probably asking you a question that you wouldn't have the answer to in front of you, but it's a case of my understanding of where we sit legally, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Hugh?
Turning to Appendix C, audit plan for the coming year, there are two areas in there where you are auditing areas where we have relatively limited involvement because they're being run for us under contract, which is the Guildhall and the Pyramids. Could you explain more fully than you have done under provisional scope, what is the scope of your audit of these matters? I think this is important for something, in view of something which is coming up later in the agenda.
Of course. If I take them one at a time, and this is a provisional assessment, so the scope may change at a later date. But in relation to the Guildhall, we have actually undertaken a couple of reviews historically. Now, the council give over monetary sums to the Guildhall, and there are terms and conditions that are attached to that. Now, one of the things that we can have a look at, and it would be appropriate, would be how they are using those funds. We have also historically had a look at any of our assets that are being used, and that is on the inventory side. But in actual fact, for this particular review, I am wanting to look at what the long-term plans are of the trust that is over there and how that correlates with the funding that we have kind of moving forward. So in relation to the Guildhall, that is what we are likely to look at. In relation to the pyramids, historically, again, we have carried out reviews where we've looked at the contract side and the contract management side, because, again, obviously a number of the reputational risks and financial risk will rest with the authority. Because we've not looked at either of them for a few years, that is why they are back in for consideration, and the pyramids one is likely to be more contract related. And there's a large element of that where it's actually looking at internally within the organisation what contract monitoring is being performed. So it's not wholeheartedly on the pyramids.
Is that okay, Hugh? Yep. Okay.
And Councillor Bosher is correct. We pulled the information from the website, and the 18 does include Drayton, so it would be 17, not 18. Thank you.
Okay, members. Thank you. So can we then, on item 5, can we note the audit performance for 1819 to the 22nd of February 2019? Can we note the highlighted areas of control weakness from the 2018-19 audit plan, and can we endorse the audit plan for 1920? Is that agreed, members? Lovely, thank you. Thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is the Treasury Management Policy. Just a small booklet this time. It's only 71 pages. Could I draw members' attention, because it hit me the last time, on the actual policy document itself, somewhere. On page 61, in scrutiny, it just said the above reports are required to be adequately scrutinised before being recommended to the Council, which will be the week after next, and this role is undertaken by the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee. Okay, Michael, can I hand over to you?
Okay. Yeah, so the report sets out for Council's policies on borrowing and investing surplus cash. There has been revised guidance from the government on investments, and also the Prudential Code, which governs the Council's borrowing, has also been revised, and that is reflected in the Treasury policy brought here. In particular, for Treasury policy in previous years included risk appetite statements and the minimum revenue provision policy for setting aside funds to repay the council's debts. Those are now in the new capital strategy, which will be going to Cabinet and Council. What the report does do is it sets the Treasury management indicators, which are the boundary within which the Council's Treasury management policy activities should operate. There are two significant changes to the Treasury management policy. One is to allow investments of up to £50 million in pooled investment vehicles. These would potentially be the likes of equity funds, corporate bond funds, multi-asset funds. The reason for that is so that if our cash balances don't go down, we can hopefully invest at least some of the funds at rates which are more likely to exceed inflation and preserve the value of the council's cash in real terms. The other proposed alteration is to increase the investment limit for subsidiary companies by £10 million from £20 million to £30 million, and the purpose of that is to allow the development of a subsidiary company to develop housing in the greater Portsmouth area on a commercial basis. The report also contains recommendations that officers be given the delegated authority to operate within the Treasury management policy, and there's also a recommendation on how variances from the policy, should they happen, will be reported to the leader, the chair of Governance and Audit Committee, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much for that. Excuse me. We've got various appendices as well to this, members, but I think, can we do with it as a whole, or because I tried to look at the different sections, but it doesn't quite work out. I've got some questions on it, but they're all over the place. So I'll throw it open then to members first then, if that's okay. Any points, any questions or any points? Hugh, please. And Paige, Hugh, please.
Could you give me, firstly, advise me on why the ratio is going up, and secondly, how you see this affecting our flexibility and in what areas?
Well, first of all, the reason why the ratio is going up is because there's substantial amounts of borrowing in our capital programme. In terms of flexibility in setting the budget, it is the case that borrowing costs are largely fixed, so therefore in setting the budget in future years there is less flexibility. I think that is probably something that needs to be accepted as part of the Council's capital plans. Yeah, I think that's where we are.
I think the scheme specifically that's driving up that figure is the investment in the port for the cruise ship terminal that they're trying to build down there, and also the passenger boarding bridge that's also been approved in the capital programme to be funded from borrowing. So it's primarily being driven by port investment.
And is this flexibility, this declining flexibility, likely to cause us serious problems? Because I have no feel for how serious this will be for budget setting.
Yeah, I mean, it does reduce the council's flexibility. I think in the order of things, I don't think it's massive, and after a peak in 21-22, it does start to go down again. Having said that, with the investment in the port, we would hope that that would increase the contribution to the council's finances made by the port, and that would hopefully counteract the effects of a greater proportion of the council's budget being on debt servicing costs.
Thank you.
Could I just reinforce, hopefully is probably understating it, in that all of these investments where we use borrowing is subject to a detailed financial appraisal. Unless the planned investment will generate savings and also cover the servicing of the debt, the council wouldn't make the investment. So it's more than a hope that it will be a detailed appraisal that will dictate whether or not we actually do enter into that borrowing.
John? Yeah, some questions on two of the recommendations, 3.1c 1 and 2, and the first one was about pooled investments, and I'm assuming from what Julian's just said there, this clearly is goes into the Treasury management policy strategy, but doesn't necessarily mean that it gives us capacity to enter into such investments. But I just want to understand pooled investments, who we are actually or would be pooling with. Is it other local authorities, or does it go beyond that? In respect to the recommendation about the maximum limit of an investment in a subsidiary company, on page 89, that talks about category 10 will consist of investments in subsidiary companies. In particular, funds could be invested to facilitate the establishment of a subsidiary company to develop housing in the Greater Portsmouth area on a commercial basis. That says could be invested. I wondered if there was any plans to do that, or has there been any preliminary investigation into setting up such a company? I suppose the concern would be that that only talks about property on a commercial basis, and clearly there's a great need for affordable housing in Portsmouth. Is that company able to also build properties that are available for affordable housing, or is it only properties that would then be available on a commercial rent basis, or indeed being sold on a commercial basis?
To start with the pooled funds, these are funds managed by investment managers, and our investments would be likely to be pooled with private sector organisations such as pension funds and that sort of thing. I mean, it is effectively a number of organisations pay into a fund, and then a professional manager will invest the funds in line with the mandate of that fund, which will detail what the funds can be invested in. I mean, it is effectively rather similar to a unit trust or something along those lines. In terms of the housing company, plans have preliminary plans have been made for it. I think Julian knows more about where we are than I do.
The company's been formed, and the company, I'm sure people are aware, the company is called Ravelin. This is laying the framework in place that would enable the company to operate in the event that it did stand up and begin to build houses. So the decisions of the housing mixes that Ravelin built will be driven by their business case, and we will only then enter into that borrowing if the business case stood up. At this stage, I wouldn't be able to comment on what that precise mix of housing would be, because I don't think the plans are that advanced at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions. On page 77, the debt reschedule bit. I understand the debt reschedule. We've done it in the past, haven't we? But it's just in relation to the Public Works Loans Board, and it says account will need to be taken of premium payments to the Loans Board. Is that lump sum, or would that there'd be extra payments, but would that be by instalments?
No, if the premium payable to the Public Works Loans Board is a lump sum at the time that the current lending is paid off early.
And we'd have to find out from somewhere?
Yes, we do have to find it from somewhere. We usually fund it from our surplus cash balances.
Thanks. Just to clarify, we would only do this if, in the event that we had one loan that we wanted to redeem early, because it was structured in such a way that we paid lower interest on the new loan that then covered the cost of the premium that we had to pay. There would have to be a net benefit to the council of redeeming a debt early and then taking out another loan before we would consider doing that. And as a consequence of those premium payments, it's quite unusual for us to restructure our debt in this way because of the value of those payments we would have to make.
Okay, thank you. Could I just, on the next page 79, municipal bonds edging to the MBA, and then somewhere later on talks about universities and investing in universities, whatever. Do they come into operation in the next financial year? I'm not clear with this.
Right, the Municipal Bonds Agency was set up by the Local Government Association probably a couple of years ago now, and I think it would be fair to say that it hasn't yet got off the ground. In terms of lending to universities, we see universities as a potential place where we could invest our funds if they had a suitable credit rating, but to date we haven't actually found a suitable way into that market.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question from me. 1121 talks about repo, reverse repo. Took me back to the 60s. But would we use this term of borrowing then? Is this something we would look at, or is this something we would avoid, like whatever?
That is essentially where we would lend to an organisation that probably wouldn't meet our credit criteria, but the loan would effectively be secured on government gilts, which are about the most secure form of debt that there is in this country. Having said that, whereas we maintain the ability to do it in our policy, again, we haven't found an interest rate yet which would make us want to do it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Julian. Any other points, questions from members? Can we then, the recommendations, I'll just do them number by number, if that's okay, wherever they are. So recommended on Treasury Management Policy 1A, 1B, 1C, Roman 1, Roman 2, 1D, Roman 1, Roman 2, Roman 3, Roman 4, and 1E. Agreed, members? Okay, thank you. We now move on. I think it's where are we? I'm all over the place. I've torn the agenda. Oh, the Health and Wellbeing Board Constitution. 1, 2, 3. Okay, who's Kelly? Is that your good self? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. So this report comes to Governance, Audit and Standards Committee as part of its journey through the process to enable changes to the Health and Wellbeing Board constitution. As set out in the paper, the Health and Wellbeing Board is a statutory body of local government which is convened from both the local authority and the CCG and is responsible for taking an overview of health provision within the locality. Given changes that are happening in the broader health system now, and also the need to start bringing some of the other groups together, some of the other partnerships that are across the authority, such as the Children's Trust Partnership and the Safe Portsmouth Partnership, to take a broader look at issues as they affect people across the life course rather than carving them up, it suggested that we actually revise the constitution of the Health and Wellbeing Board to take a slightly broader remit and expand the membership of that group to enable it to do so. So the draft constitution for the Health and Wellbeing Board, as attached at Appendix 1, is designed to achieve those outcomes. It's been considered in detail at a number of meetings now by the Health and Wellbeing Board themselves in order to enable them to fulfil those functions, and has also been considered by the Children's Trust Board and Safer Portsmouth Partnership as part of its journey here, all of whom are in agreement with the proposed changes. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, points from members? Thank you. Sorry, sir.
It's a kind of angled question from this, because I know virtually nothing about the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I can see that it has overview and oversight. How do we judge whether it is doing its work properly? Who audits the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board? And to whom is that reported?
So in terms of how we judge a success, I suppose in broad terms the success of the work would be judged by the achievement of the objectives in the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which is owned by the Health and Wellbeing Board and sets out a wide range of objectives that it wants to achieve in terms of population healthcare in Portsmouth. Very happy to send copies around for the board if that would be useful, and as part of their work the board do regularly consider how they are progressing on those. I'm not conscious around its formal audit arrangements, although it would be audited as part of other work if the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board reflected that. And there was another element to the question, wasn't there? There was a third one.
Yes, question of responsibility, because it seems to stand there very much as a thing in itself. To whom is it responsible?
So it doesn't actually at the moment necessarily, although that's not to say in future, subject to other reports like this, it wouldn't change, but at the moment it doesn't necessarily take many decisions in itself. It's been both a, I suppose, consultative steering forum for decisions that will then subsequently be taken through formal groups such as the Cabinet Member in Council or Council itself, or through the CCG Governing Board, or in some cases a decision is already taken by those bodies and then comes back to the Health and Wellbeing Board to be endorsed and, I suppose, shared more widely across the partnership. So it has few decision-making responsibilities that have been delegated to it, although it does have some statutory functions that need to be fulfilled.
Sorry, you're going to talk about the audit. Good. Yeah.
I was going to say, in relation to the audit, it will be subject to our auditing regime, specifically looking at actually the board. I'm just having a look to see when the last time was that we audited it for you, so I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. John?
In actual fact, sorry.
Go on.
Sorry, Councillor Madden. It was last audited in 16-17. And
it's a very long time ago.
2016-17. And did we do a follow-up? It had limited assurance. It would have come along to this forum, this committee, obviously reporting-wise. When we did the follow-up, we also had limited assurance. So it's not quite back in the pot yet to have another review, but it is something we would have a look at.
You have it on your radar, yes?
It is on the audit radar. Not that it's causing concern, but because because of the implications and the wider elements.
If I can just add to that, it was also looked at through the CCG's round of audits, but as part, not in its own right, but as part of the broader partnership arrangements to which the CCG are party.
Thanks, Chair. Far be it from me to suggest that we have even more paperwork when we've got over 450 pages of reports here, but I do find this item very brief. We have the Constitution there, or the new Constitution, but I do find this item very brief in terms of justification and reason for doing this. So I note the use of the word efficiency, and I note what Kelly has said in terms of rationale, or brief rationale, as to why this is being done. But I do have some reservations, in the absence of that detailed explanation. And I talk from experience of sitting on the Safer Portsmouth Partnership, who had a particular focus on community safety and a particular focus in terms of crime in the city and statistics and trends, and particularly with youth crime as well. And I always found that a very beneficial body, and indeed I think it helped to guide the council in its work in terms of crime reduction and youth offending. So if it's being subsumed into the Health and Wellbeing Board, my concern would be that focus is being lost, and you've only got to turn on the news, look at the debates that are currently going on in terms of crime and concerns, not least about violent crime, and the capacity for both the police and other authorities to deal with that. So I do have a sort of major reservation on that. If we're going to lose that focus by rolling it into the Health and Wellbeing Board. Kelly did say that the Safe Portsmouth Partnership were in agreement, so I'd be interested to see something written from them and what sort of review was undertaken into the work they do, and how that can be accommodated in the Health and Wellbeing Board. But like I say, I do have in the absence of that information, I've got a real reservation, not least given the needs of the city, the needs particularly in terms to focus on crime and crime reduction, and also youth offending.
Yeah, I think that's such a pertinent point at the moment. So just in terms of the aims for the Health and Wellbeing Board, to clarify, the rewritten aims include those responsibilities around the trends and data analysis, which over time, things have happened sort of sequentially. So the first requirement was for a Safer Portsmouth Partnership. That was quite a long time ago. Subsequently, there's been a responsibility for a joint strategic needs analysis that is supposed to include the Safer Portsmouth Partnership crime analysis. So over time, things have started to converge anyway. So there's an extent to which this is a tidying up exercise on that element. In respect of focusing particularly on the issues around knife crime, for example, serious violence is a really interesting prism, which is one of the things that's been looked at around this, I suppose, coming together, because I think you're exactly right. There's an angle that's been taken around Safer Portsmouth Partnership, which is around looking at sort of the particular criminality issues. The Children's Trust Partnership would have been subsequently looking at disaffection from young people from education, which has clearly been an issue, adverse childhood experiences, childhood exploitation and harm. The Health and Wellbeing Board have been looking at other issues such as what is the response to substance misuse, what is the response to the public health approach around such issues as deprivation and poverty, all of which sort of intersect. And I think that's absolutely part of the issue that's been alighted on, that we tend to, in each of those groups, take an item and look at it through a certain prism. The ability to bring those together and look at them in a single way has probably been slightly hampered by the way we've tried to carve them down to a certain partnership that looks at a certain angle. I think if you look at the membership, that would absolutely include the Chief Superintendent of Police, for example, our probation colleagues, representatives from schools. So it's not just about changing the terms of reference, it is broadening that membership to ensure that there is that life course across. In terms of the discussions that have been had, absolutely happy to furnish you with those sort of records of those discussions.
Yeah, I think that would be useful, Chair, particularly as this is going to full council. but I'd certainly like to see more information before coming to a conclusion on this.
Yeah, can I say, I was involved at the inception of the Health and Wellbeing Board, being a cabinet member for social care or whatever, so wrote myself into the position of chairing the Health and Wellbeing Board, you noticed. And it's evolved, you're right, the membership has evolved over the years. I mean, mainly it was councillors then, and CCG, and that was it. And then some co-opted people like Health Watch, but not lots of them. Now it's evolving more. I think the composition, when I've looked at it, is actually better now, because it involves more people, more decision makers within the community itself. The same questions you raised, John, were raised. This was raised about 6 months ago. I was back on the Health and Wellbeing Board as the chair of HOSP, but only for a short time. And the questions you raised were raised then. You know, is it going to be better? Will it actually give a better remit and better discussion, in-depth discussion to members of the board? And I was convinced that it would. I think you're right. There are prisms. You look at things, prisms, some things, very detailed, but nevertheless sometimes loses the big picture. And I think this. I actually agree with that. It should be. There should be different members on it. And we talked about A and B, so there'll be voting members. Tries not to vote, but had a vote, 2 votes in the last year. But when we set it up, we did say we expected to come to consensus clearly on it, because we're talking about the health and well-being of our people here rather than fighting over silly little things, as the 2 votes in fact were. So, if you're happy, just go to Council, John. I think we should go to Council. I think they'd like to implement this as quickly as possible. They're telling us that the Children's Trust Board and the Safer Portsmouth Partnership would be better within this. That's what they're telling us, John. I don't know, but I'm happy to give it a run anyway. So if you can provide a bit more information, I can bring it up, John, at the Council meeting, that's okay, but let this go forward under the recommendations there. And then any additional information, say yourself or anybody's not happy with, we could take up at the council meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Kelly?
If I can just add to that as well, there are some very, very specific functions that both the Health and Wellbeing Board and Safer Portsmouth Partnership do fulfil. Generally, for those very specific detailed functions, they've been done in task and finish groups or sub-boards of those, and they would continue. So, for example, in relation to the Health and Wellbeing Board, they have a particular role in relation to pharmacy closures, and there is a particular process that they undertake that's not within the main board. Similarly, the Safer Portsmouth Partnership has a particular role in convening domestic homicide review groups, and that would continue under those auspices. So there'd be no change. There's very detailed and very specific functions.
Okay, John?
Just one follow-up. There was something I should have raised earlier, but it sort of caught my eye when going through the Constitution. And I can't see the lead member for community safety on there. What's the reason for that, given that clearly they were the ones that presided over the Safer Portsmouth Partnership?
I think it was felt that when we were looking at the membership, the leader of the council is represented within that, and that would bring I suppose, viewpoint to bear. The other members of the council that are there are part of their statutory requirement to be attending, so I think it's the leader of the opposition and both the cabinet member for children's services and the cabinet member for health and wellbeing, so they have a statutory requirement to be invitees to that board.
Okay, John. Okay. On item 7, the Health and Wellbeing Board Constitution, can we support the changes to the Constitution for the Health and Wellbeing Board, which are set out, and then secondly recommend these to Council on the 19th of March? Is that okay, members? Thank you. Well, yeah, we'll see what happens. But for today's meeting, is that okay? Thank you. The next item is councillor training for a member. Oh, God. I'm all over the place. Yeah. Item 8, councillor training and development.
Members, this report's here for information, and it will then, it actually doesn't go any further, does it? It doesn't go into council. This is, I think, been agreed with you, Chairman, as well. The extent of the training, we do this annually so that members can be made aware of what is available to them, and it's obviously the training which you as members have requested.
Okay, members, any questions or any points? No. Simon?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Some of these are mandatory training sessions like the planning committee and the licensing committee, are those the only two that are mandatory training sessions before councillors can actually sit?
Yes.
Because all new councillors have to go through the code of conduct and all the other bits and pieces that they have to go through all that as a matter of course. There are concerns in other areas, and I don't know, Chairman, if this is actually something that we can enforce, but all the rest of it is effectively optional, isn't it? Is there any way, when it comes to things like picking out equality impact assessment training and safeguarding, that we could make those mandatory? Because certain things that we do or have done in the past, and I've sat on things like social media and all that sort of stuff, seem to be very well attended, but some of the ones that you would regard as councillors as being pretty critical to the role seem to be a little bit hit and miss. And I would have thought some sort of register requiring councillors to refresh on perhaps a 2-yearly basis on things like safeguarding issues, equality, diversity, equality impact. I'm flexible on what they are, but some of them I think probably need perhaps a mandatory level to it, if it's at all possible to actually enforce that. I don't know what other members think about that.
Chairman, can I just help with that? I mean, the difficulty we've got at the moment is under the present Code of Conduct and the framework within which it works as a result of the Localism Act, we're very restricted in the penalties which we can impose where a member declines to undertake training. In fact, there is no penalty which we could impose. Having said that, we can say to a member that they cannot sit on a particular committee, such as a licensing committee or planning committee, if they're not undertaking the training. The reality is, to ensure that we can be quorate in such meetings, we frequently have to undertake one-to-one training with members at short notice. However, the silver lining to this, Clyde, may be that the Code of Conduct is nationally under review at the moment, and there is a report which has been produced by the Committee on Standards in Public Life, which hopefully, when the government deals with other things which it's got before them, we may end up moving back towards a national code with a greater power to be able to impose sanctions. And this may be a circumstance where you can mandate particular types of training within the Code of Conduct, and then if members don't comply with it, there may be sanctions which can be imposed. At the moment, as you know, if we impose a sanction, the only sanction we can effectively impose is one of censure, which is not particularly effective. So the short answer to your question is there's not a lot we can do at the moment, but hopefully the situation will over the next year improve.
Okay, members, this is for information only. I congratulate the Council on putting forward this paper, because there's lots of internal and external training. Whether we take it or not, you're absolutely right, Simon, it's a different matter. But it's there, and well done. Thank you.
I'm back on that, because I can remember when I was first elected, and this perhaps takes it slightly further into members' CVs to a certain degree, and I don't know how you can enforce that, but when I was first elected in 2002, I was given this wonderful black folder with my record of my training achievements in it. Leo may well remember it. One of these black things where you could stick certificates in the transparent envelopes. It's still pristine. It's probably over the years has welded itself shut with not a single certificate actually in it. Now, it sort of comes back to the and I've been on plenty of these training courses, and some of them I found very, very well, but there is an element there that a lot of people that put themselves forward for local councillors and such like don't actually have anything to show when it comes to training or anything like that as part of a CV when they're in what you might call the real world. Is there any way that we can sort of take this forward so that there's something meaningful attached to those sorts of things?
Certainly happy to take that away and see what proposals we can make.
John?
Yeah, in the absence of any formal measures or enforcement measures that can be taken, I suppose the only other mechanism would be via the political groupings in terms of group leaders. I do know they meet with the chief executive, and maybe they've met with Michael in the past, but this could be that is a forum which can try and exercise some informal enforcement or monitoring in terms of training. I say that as a group of one, so I'll do my own. But clearly that is something I think that can be raised on a regular basis with group leaders, and it's something that can be done through the political groupings.
Okay, John, thank you. You're right. Okay, can we move on to item 9, which is the Performance Management Update Quarter 3 2018-19. This is only over 153 pages. Okay, I'll hang over to John. Is it John? Kelly?
No, it's Kelly.
Oh, Kelly.
Yeah, so as we all know, this is a regular report that comes to the committee on a quarterly basis. I suppose loosely I would use the word summarising the performance issues for the authority under the heading of the kind of business as usual performance of the authority, the key projects being undertaken, and then taking an assessment of the risks that directors have identified. As always, very happy to take any questions about particular issues, although I've given the size of it, I can't particularly guarantee that I will know the detail of those, but of course always happy to go away and come back in more detail if that is required. The themes that are picked up are generally the same themes that emerge, and you wouldn't expect those to change really, but I think it's always helpful to recognise that there is a significant theme about demand for services in those demand-driven areas continues to rise, and that puts pressure on the authority really, and that is particularly apparent in relation to those people services, so around children requiring social care and also adult social care. Capacity is a challenge, so there is finite capacity within the system to drive what are a significant number of business as usual areas of activity and transformation. That's something we need to be mindful of, and of course there are financial pressures that are built into the system as well, and we know those particularly around children's social care and adult social care. We previously agreed that this has probably gone as far as it can go as a format for reporting in terms of being helpful to members, and that's been driven by lots of things, and we members of this board have been around on this board long enough to know what the history to that is, so we don't really need to rehearse that, but I think there is an element that we're all quite keen to see that now slimmed down somewhat and go back to that more kind of exception reporting, key headlines, and a bit easier to find our way into the detail. So we've started to look at some formats that we can move towards. These were shared with Councillor Madden as part of the Chair's briefing, and we agreed that they would be tabled for consideration if that was helpful. But in essence, and I will circulate these, we'll be moving to a format which is familiarly used across other authorities, which is much more graphic. So it takes a smaller subset of performance information and presents it in a more graphic form with some narrative to just, I suppose, try and pinpoint the issues that are important, and gets down to a much smaller subset of information. In respect to performance projects, I wouldn't expect the format of that to change greatly, because I think that is quite helpful, but we would have a slimmed down subset of reports. And I think in relation to risk, we'll move away from that very broad capture of all the directorate risks and come down to a much more focused discussion of our organisational strategic risks, which we'll do again in a much more dashboard format, and we'll probably take those on a deep dive in a sort of rolling basis. So we'll look at the whole set each time in terms of the assurance numbers, but probably take a more detailed look at one on each committee on a rolling basis. So again, we can spend more time looking at the detail of them rather than trying to cover everything in one report, which I think probably isn't necessarily getting us to the nub of what we need to know. So those are the proposals. I think we also agreed in the briefing it would be helpful just to touch base in the new municipal year with the new committee to make sure that that fulfils their requirements, but that's broadly the planning that we're doing and the format that we're moving towards. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll be past those around sometime, but we'll do it at the end of this one, if that's okay. I don't want members to be distracted, because we have this report in front of us and we have to deal with that. So can we, any questions? Again, there are separate appendices to it, but I'm just going to leave it down to members if they say whatever the page number is or whatever the query or point that they want to make. Any points on this? Hugh?
I've got a few points coming through, but first of all, page 189, regeneration. there are risks around consultation on major schemes such as coastal defences, with the extra cost of delivery that may result from these processes. But I can see there's an extra cost of delivery, but apart from that, it's usually a minor cost, what are the risks?
No, I couldn't answer in detail on that, but I'm very happy to get some more detail on that and circulate that to the committee.
Because it seems to me that in consulting the public, whilst there is the risk that the public will be objectionable and awkward and not want what we want, I can't see any other risk there.
I'll clarify the meaning of that and come back to you, Councillor Mason.
Is there any more points for you?
A number of the reds give cause for concern. The referrals, page 195, referrals contact to MASH that resulted in referral to early help. This appears to have gone up significantly. Do we know any reason why this should have gone up significantly? And is there anything which we can do recommend doing about it?
This is a really significant indicator that's part of the wider Stronger Futures 2 strategy from Children's Services, which is around how do we manage some of the demand into the service and ultimately manage some of the affordability challenges. Ultimately, for some time, the authority didn't necessarily have a strong and early help offer as it has delivered, and one of the key actions of the new Director of Children's Services was to develop that early help offer and encourage more people to be accessing that before they came into statutory level service responses. So part of that is having made the service available, there is now a number coming into it. The question is, at what point do we think, yes, okay, we're now where we need to be, and at what point are we identifying demand that outstrips what we would have imagined? And I think that's the point that we're at now in terms of just understanding whether the early help response is sufficient, whether it needs to be further graduated, and whether we've actually got more flowing into the system that's suggesting we're not quite getting the early help early enough in the system. So that's certainly part of that Stronger Futures 2 project.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can I just, I just wonder if some sections are doing themselves down, that's all. If we look at page 197, and maybe there's something addressed in the youth system, but youth offending team caseloads, the baseline is 91, then it went up to 93, down to 84, then 89. It's down on the 91, but we've given ourselves a red. And again, or somebody's given themselves a red. And then the next one, again, we don't even know what the baseline is, but the numbers have gone up. The baseline could be 42 for all we know, and therefore 25 would be well below that. I don't know if anybody's any views on that, or are these saying that they're red, correct, rather than say amber or green? I don't, the specific traffic lights get me because there are shades of each of them, aren't they? But nevertheless, if we're doing red, green or amber, you know, I just wonder, Kelly, when people are looking at this, whether they're doing themselves justice, that's all.
It's a really interesting point, because a few meetings ago we used to have a system of kind of green amber, red amber, and one of the comments was we would rather, you know, which is it? Is it red or amber? But I think you're right. Sometimes there's something that's only just red, and sometimes there's something that could very easily be the other way. I think in respect of the yacht ones in particular, it has come down from the 91 marginally, and it did go down further to 84. We still know that is comparatively high with statistical neighbours, and we would want to see that lower. So I think that's the key point that's being reflected there in the red for that one. But you're right, sometimes things are only just, and there is a judgment call that's been made, but we did specifically brief that people should be very clear in their call and not be going for kind of graded colours.
If we're saying the baseline is 91, say, and it's lower than that, well then it shouldn't be red, should it?
But still high compared with others, and that's the concern they're raising.
Oh, so we're doing, okay, right. I didn't realise we were doing comparative as well as our own.
Yeah, it's something that the service would wish to see lower, and in that one some of the changes are, the significant changes will be longer term, but that is certainly something the service feels is higher than it should be for the city.
Okay, I was just trying to be nice, that's all.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed there is a need to try and rationalise this report, to try and get a bit more focus. It's got, let's say, unwieldy. Nevertheless, there's lots of information there which I think is valuable, and certainly valuable to people out there in knowing what the council's doing and where the pressures are. I think in the director's summaries, I assume that we're going to retain the director quarterly summaries. I think the directors should be giving us a report, and they should be giving us a comprehensive report along the lines that we have for children's services, which I think is insightful, and is not shying from saying what the issues are and what the key concerns are. Adult social care, I'm surprised that that is as brief as it is, given what we do know, and I think that we'd like to see more information from the director there. Public health, we have one line saying ongoing budget constraints by prioritising the work of the public health team. So I don't know, maybe Kelly can tell us why we don't have a summary there from public health, but I think we should, directors at the very least, should be giving us a comprehensive overview of what's going on in their directorate and what their concerns are. So, like I say, I hope that we continue with that, and maybe Kelly can just pick up on what happened with public health.
Just to confirm, Councillor Frey, it's absolutely the intention that we retain those narrative commentaries, because I agree with you. I think they're really important to get that inside there. I didn't receive a more fuller commentary this quarter from public health, and I'm very happy to chase that up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Any other cue?
Page 267. Following PCC being issued with a ministerial directive to produce an air quality local plan by October, work on the air quality action plan is on hold. One would have assumed that work on our air quality action plan would be at least informing the work for the ministerial directive. So what's going on?
Certainly there is quite considerable work going on, and part of that has been to validate some of the data that's held by DFT that has resulted in the issue of the ministerial directive, and to understand the modelling that has informed that, because as I suppose we would expect, it's not quite as straightforward as there being an absolute answer to these things. There are different sets of models that are used, different responses that have a different impact on the model. So in terms of the on hold, I think there's quite a lot of information that needs to be done in terms of unpicking the model, understanding the high impact with, and taking that forward. So there's certainly work progressing, but it's not yet formed into the full action plan.
Just to try and add a little bit of flesh on Kelly's comment, members may recall that in the capital programme that was recently approved at City Council, there were a number of items in that capital programme which was referring to air quality, of which the most significant one was, bringing the figure from my head, I think it was 1.6 million investment in the retrofitting of equipment to buses, which will have a direct result on improvement to air quality. So the capital programme has certainly got a number of streams in it to improve air quality.
Just one further point I'd make in relation to the Air Quality Action Plan for the next year going forward. It's being peeled out as a project in its own right that will see reported as part of the projects, because that's how we're going to choose to monitor and report it, so that everyone can see what the progress is on actually progressing that. So it'll come out of the business as usual section for here and will be reported as sort of a single line in its own right.
Right, so if I understand this correctly, the apparent contradiction here comes from the different requirements for modelling, which are coming from the ministerial directive and what we have been using to date. Thank you.
Yeah, I was...
Sorry, Simon, I think... Oh, are you okay for the minute, Hugh? I'm okay for the minute. Okay, Simon.
I was just going to add something to that one, Chairman, because I was a Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation last year, and we had... for the benefit of you, really, Hugh, we had an awful lot of problems because the government use a sort of a computer modelling system, which they have for their data, and they were refusing to accept our actual data on various sites where we actually had stations around the city that were producing the actual thing, but the government weren't accepting the real data in favour of what they were saying was from a modelling point of view. And that game of tennis went backwards and forwards for several months, I'm afraid, Hugh.
Okay, thank you for that, Simon. Do you have any more points?
They're very small things which keep. Page 349, there seems to be a really major problem here which has been outlined. It's difficult to know what the city can do to address this problem. It seems to be a national problem which is affecting us for the recruitment and retention of teachers in this city. Who will have an oversight of this, and do you know of any work which is going on to address this, so that it might be moved from red, a very deep red it would appear, towards a lighter red or even to amber?
So this work's being overseen by the Portsmouth Education Partnership. I think most people will be aware, but the Education Partnership brings together head teachers, governors, the Teaching School Alliance, academy providers and further education providers in the interest of education in the city. And it's one of their absolute priorities, because we do understand that improving attainment and achievement in the city absolutely relies on having those good quality teachers here. So it's something they've identified as a priority, and part of the reason that it is here as a project is for delivering that strategy. So this isn't necessarily read in relation to the delivery of the strategy, which is potentially misleading. It's read in relation to the current position that they would hope to be turning around with that delivery of the strategy. But yeah, it's it's their number one priority in terms of those achieving education attainment.
Thank you. Could I just then go back on page 348, which is one that the Troubled Families Recovery Plan, and we started off very well a few years back dealing with this, and there was external government money for that. But that makes sad reading the comment on it that we could be 700 families short of the attachment required to achieve 1,520 claims. But there's a date here of March 2020. Has this been accelerated in any way, Kelly, do you know, to make sure that we at least try to hit those targets or get as near as possible to?
Yeah, you're right. We made a really, really great start at Troubled Families Phase 1. The model changed Troubled Families Phase 2, and we struggled to translate the work that we'd set up for Phase 1 into Phase 2. In effect, the framework changed for the Troubled Families programme. We weren't quite in a position to translate it easily. A lot of work's been done to that, and actually quite a lot of that work has been related to the earlier point that we talked about the rollout of the early help offer in the city for families, and that has now considerably accelerated. And while it's showing red on this quarter 3, this report, isn't it? So shown red on this one, the most recent data published by the Troubled Families the Troubled Family Programme at ministerial level does show that Portsmouth is the most improved authority. And now we've moved considerably up that national ranking, and we expect to carry on doing that with the work that we've done, which has included pulling in some additional data resource to go back over and reinforce those claims. So yeah, that's absolutely improving. The rate of claims are accelerating, and actually one of the things they have done is actually release some funding that was being withheld until we showed improvement, so that has now been released. So I would expect that to continue to be an improving story.
I think you should write these reports. That was more upbeat than the report itself. Thank you, Karen.
A couple of very minor ones, Chairman. Page 365, the replacement of the master door fire doors with girder fire doors. I assume this will be at the contractor's expense and not at the City Council's expense.
Liquidated damages.
Julian just tells me yes, it is.
Thank you. Well, totally a quick one. And the other one on page 377, the full business case on the South Sea Flood Defence Scheme, are we approaching the LEP for finance, and if so, when? Because there would seem to be a danger that we will get all of the various strands in this project out of sync.
Yeah, the various funding patchwork that needs to be put together on this is obviously a huge concern for the team. The LEP are being approached for funding, and we're in discussion with them about which programmes would be appropriate and what time frame that would need to be. They're not the only funders that are being approached. We are taking a very, very comprehensive suite of every available bit of funding that could be levered into this. But you're right, that does complicate the time frame. So actually trying to peel out self-contained elements that can hit funder requirements is really important. But yes, we are approaching the LEP.
Right. It would be useful if you could arrange that members would have an idea of the sequence so that they are aware that things are not getting out of sync, because certainly from other sources people are beginning to get quite worried about this.
I'm happy to request the team circulate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Members, any other questions or points? No, okay. Happy to note the report. Thank you. Thank you. The draft pro form or the draft template or whatever, do you want to hand that out now to people?
Yeah, I'm happy to circulate
Yeah,
that,
people-
I'm happy to email it outside the meeting for people to have a look at separately, whichever works.
like-
They're here, so.
Would you like to have a copy of it now, just to have a look at it? This is just for members, I think, to look at at this stage, because I hope that the new committee will have a meeting early after the annual elections with it and look at the format of it and come up with something, yeah. But that would be useful if you'd have that. If that's okay, Kelly, just have a look at. Thank you. On to item 10. Okay, we're on to item 10, which is the exclusion of public and press. That's only for the confidential bits which you've received with that. There is a white paper here, and if members are happy, we can, if they need to ask questions or points on the white paper itself. But on the confidential bits, I have to move exclusion of press and public. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to if members will just stick, and thank you, David, to the white bits of this agenda item number 11. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. This is for information only. This is your quarterly procurement management information report. Comes to this committee quarterly, provides the committee with information on procurement indicators over 4 broad themes. Firstly, compliance with contract procedure rules. Secondly, regarding waivers. Thirdly, regarding spend on the council's largest suppliers. And fourth, on contract performance management. The headlines, I believe, are that compliance with contract procedure rules is 96%, which is above the target the committee set. Waivers, the use of waivers has come down by 80% compared to the last time this report was brought to the committee. Happy to take questions as you go through the white papers. Again, as Kelly said, I don't guarantee I'll know the answers, but I'll do my best.
Okay, could I just ask a question? I know this for information only, but could I ask on page 436, just something jumped out at me. The very last sentence, legal services have commented that whilst this methodology is indicative of good practice, it is not indicative as to compliance with legal requirements. Should I be frightened about that?
I don't think you should, no, but it is true that the way that we declare whether a transaction is compliant or not with contract procedure rules is by assessing whether that transaction is linked to a contract that's on the council's contracts register. For a contract to be on the council's contract register, it will be compliant with contract procedure rules, but what legal are saying is that there is a link which relies on officers to tag transactions with the number of a contract for it to pass through as a compliant, and so it's not a direct link to the contract register.
there's only one.
What I would say is, it says it's not definitive as to compliance. I think you can rest assured that if there is a problem which your legal team's aware of, they will deal with it.
Okay, well, I assume that, but thank you for that, yeah. On the details of waivers, there's only one with not obtaining 3 bids, which is good. There's only one, but are there any real excuses for people not obtaining 3 bids?
I don't believe there are many excuses, but there are certain niche markets where we may not be able to attract attention.
Except a lot with the port and things again, except all that.
All other reasons are also due to scheduling and timing, where there are a small number of key suppliers delivering to the public sector. We, due to potentially size of projects that we're advertising, may not attract enough interest from them simply because there's other more interesting and larger projects going on. And so we do find that we would get reduced bids due to that reason.
Okay, there's only one which is good in that sense, and I do accept that there will be various circumstances. Could I just ask on the page 445, David, on the top 20 suppliers, we're talking about a lifetime contract with Mountjoy of 130 million, and then with Comserve of 130 million. Is that the same 130 million, or are there 2 separate ones?
It's 2 separate contracts, so between them worth in excess of £250 million.
Oh, they're their own business, aren't they? Okay. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm faffing about here. Any members, any points on the white paper bit? No?
Can you get a list of the waivers?
Sorry. Yeah, we have a list of the waivers, yeah. It's in there somewhere, yeah. In the white bit. Yeah, yeah. Okay, members. Yeah, we have them. Where are they at? Yeah, we'll pay, yeah. Four 6.5. It's the very end of the Appendix 2. Appendix 2, Simon, of the white paper bit. Okay. If there's nothing further on the white papers, I'll go back to item 10, which is exclusion of the press and public. Okay, thank you very much. And then we'll go into the exempt session. So I have to ask the press and the public to leave, please. Thank you.